The AMC Javelin wasn't supposed to become one of the most memorable American muscle cars of its era. It wasn't built by General Motors, Ford, or Chrysler, the three companies that dominated the muscle car wars of the late 1960s. Instead, it came from American Motors Corporation, better known as AMC, a much smaller automaker that often struggled to compete with Detroit's giants. Most people knew AMC for practical, economical transportation rather than high-performance machines, while competitors were pouring millions into Mustangs, Camaros, Chargers, and Barracudas. AMC simply didn't have the same financial resources. But the company understood something important. The American car market was changing rapidly, and younger buyers were looking for exciting cars that reflected their personalities. If AMC wanted to survive, it couldn't continue building only sensible family sedans. It needed a halo car, something exciting enough to bring customers into dealerships and prove that the company could build more than just economy cars. That ambitious idea would eventually become the AMC Javelin. The timing couldn't have been more important. Ford had completely reshaped the automotive industry with the launch of the Mustang in April 1964. Practically overnight, the pony car segment exploded into one of the hottest categories in America. Chevrolet answered with the Camaro, Pontiac introduced the Firebird, Plymouth had the Barracuda, Mercury launched the Cougar, and Dodge entered with the Challenger a little later. Every major manufacturer wanted a slice of this growing market because young Americans had money to spend and wanted stylish cars with powerful engines. AMC watched this battle from the sidelines for several years. Company executives knew they couldn't ignore the trend forever, but they also knew they couldn't simply copy what everyone else was doing. Whatever they built had to be different enough to stand out, while remaining affordable enough for a company with limited resources. The task of designing AMC's new performance car fell largely to Dick Teague, one of the most talented automotive designers of his generation. Teague had a remarkable ability to create attractive vehicles despite strict budgets, and he approached the Javelin with a fresh perspective. Instead of building a carbon copy of the Mustang or Camaro, he gave the car its own distinct identity. The front end featured a long, sculpted hood that hinted at the powerful engines available underneath. The roofline flowed smoothly toward the rear, creating a sporty fastback appearance without sacrificing practicality. Wide rear fenders gave the car an aggressive stance, while the proportions made it look muscular even when parked. Unlike many pony cars that prioritize style over passenger comfort, the Javelin was actually wider than several competitors, providing noticeably more shoulder room for both front and rear passengers. It wasn't just designed to look good, it was built to be genuinely usable as an everyday car. AMC also placed an unusual emphasis on safety, something that wasn't always a priority in the late 1960s performance market. At a time when horsepower dominated advertisements, AMC proudly promoted features like energy-absorbing steering columns, padded dashboards, recessed controls, and standard three-point seatbelts. The company understood that buyers wanted excitement, but it also believed they appreciated thoughtful engineering. This combination of performance and safety helped distinguish the Javelin from many rivals that focused almost exclusively on speed. When the AMC Javelin officially debuted as a 1968 model, it immediately attracted attention. Buyers could choose from a range of engines depending on their budget and performance expectations. Entry-level models came equipped with AMC's dependable inline-six engine, providing respectable fuel economy and affordable ownership. However, the real excitement came from the available V8 options. Customers could select a 290 cubic inch V8 for balanced performance or move up to the larger 343 cubic inch engine for considerably more power. At the very top of the lineup sat the legendary 390 cubic inch V8, producing over 300 horsepower and enough torque to make the lightweight Javelin genuinely quick by the standards of the day. Equipped with a 4-speed manual transmission and proper gearing, a 390-powered Javelin could accelerate alongside many of the best-known muscle cars from Detroit. Performance wasn't the only thing AMC wanted people talking about. The company's marketing department launched one of the boldest advertising campaigns in its history. Rather than politely introducing the Javelin, AMC openly challenged Ford's Mustang, the undisputed king of the pony car segment. Television commercials and magazine advertisements compared the Javelin directly against its competitors, suggesting buyers should consider something different from the obvious choices. One particularly memorable campaign even featured Mustangs being smashed with sledgehammers, symbolizing AMC's determination to break into a market dominated by larger companies. It was a risky strategy, but it generated exactly what AMC needed: attention. Suddenly, people who had never considered visiting an AMC dealership were curious about what this underdog company had created. automotive journalists were pleasantly surprised after driving the new car. Many expected the Javelin to be merely an imitation of the Mustang, but road tests praised its comfortable ride, balanced handling, spacious interior, and competitive performance. Reviewers noted that the car felt refined while still delivering the excitement buyers expected from a muscle-era coupe. Its suspension struck a good balance between comfort and responsiveness, making it suitable for both highway cruising and spirited driving on winding roads. While it didn't necessarily outperform every rival in every category, it proved that AMC was capable of building a serious contender rather than just an inexpensive alternative. The market responded positively as well. During its first model year, tens of thousands of Javelins found new owners, exceeding many expectations for a company of AMC's size. Perhaps more importantly, the average buyer was significantly younger than AMC's traditional customer base. This was exactly the demographic the company desperately wanted to attract. Young professionals, college graduates, and first-time performance car buyers suddenly viewed AMC as a brand capable of building something exciting instead of merely practical transportation. Dealers reported increased showroom traffic, with many visitors coming specifically to see the new Javelin after hearing about it through advertisements or automotive magazines. The Javelin also benefited from arriving during the absolute peak of America's muscle car era. Gasoline was relatively inexpensive, insurance costs had not yet skyrocketed, and emissions regulations were still years away from dramatically reducing engine performance. Manufacturers competed fiercely to build bigger engines and faster cars, and buyers eagerly embraced this horsepower war. In this environment, the Javelin fit perfectly. It offered V8 performance, attractive styling, and competitive pricing, making it a compelling alternative to more familiar names. Owners appreciated the fact that they didn't see another identical car at every traffic light. Driving a Javelin made a statement that the owner valued individuality as much as performance. AMC didn't stop there. Recognizing that enthusiasts wanted even more excitement, the company simultaneously introduced the AMX, a shorter two-seat sports coupe that shared much of the Javelin's engineering. While the AMX became the headline-grabbing performance icon, the Javelin remained the volume seller, giving AMC a complete performance lineup capable of attracting a wide variety of buyers. Together, these two models transformed the company's public image almost overnight. For the first time in years, AMC wasn't being discussed simply as the maker of economical compact cars. It had entered the muscle car conversation alongside some of the biggest names in American automotive history. As 1968 came to a close, AMC had every reason to feel optimistic. The Javelin had exceeded expectations, earned respect from automotive journalists, attracted younger buyers, and proven that the smallest member of Detroit's automotive industry could compete against companies many times its size. But the company wasn't satisfied with simply selling performance cars. Executives knew that real credibility in the muscle car world came from success on the racetrack. If the Javelin could win against Ford, Chevrolet, and Chrysler in organized competition, it would earn a reputation that no advertising campaign could ever buy. That realization would soon lead AMC into one of the fiercest racing battles of the late 1960s, setting the stage for the Javelin's greatest years. By the end of the 1960s, AMC had accomplished something very few people thought was possible. The Javelin had established itself as a legitimate competitor in the crowded pony car market, earning respect from both enthusiasts and automotive journalists. But inside American Motors Corporation, executives knew that respectable sales alone wouldn't be enough to elevate the brand. Ford had built the Mustang's reputation through racing. Chevrolet had the Camaro competing on tracks across America. Chrysler's muscle cars were dominating drag strips. If AMC truly wanted the Javelin to be taken seriously, it had to prove itself where performance mattered most, on the racetrack. That decision would change the Javelin's history forever. For the 1970 model year, AMC unveiled a dramatically redesigned Javelin. While the original version had clean, understated styling, the new model looked far more aggressive. Dick Teague and his design team gave the car bulging front fenders, a sharply pointed nose, sculpted body lines, and a wide, muscular stance that immediately separated it from every other pony car on the road. The most distinctive feature was the exaggerated front wheel arches, which flowed into the doors in a way that looked almost futuristic for the era. Some critics initially thought the styling was too bold, but it quickly became one of the Javelin's defining characteristics. Even today, the second-generation Javelin is instantly recognizable among classic American muscle cars. The redesign wasn't just about appearance. Engineers improved the chassis, refined the suspension, and strengthened the body structure. The goal was to create a car that could perform equally well on public roads and racing circuits. Buyers still had access to a range of engines, but performance enthusiasts naturally gravitated toward the V8-powered versions. The familiar 360 cubic inch V8 became a popular option, while the legendary 390 V8 continued to deliver serious muscle. Later, AMC introduced an even larger and more powerful 401 cubic inch V8, producing enormous torque that transformed the Javelin into one of the quickest cars the company had ever built. Around this same time, AMC launched one of the most famous versions of the Javelin, the Mark Donohue edition. Mark Donohue was already one of America's most respected racing drivers, known for his technical understanding of race cars and his ability to extract every ounce of performance from a vehicle. AMC partnered with Donohue to create a special edition inspired by the company's racing efforts. These cars featured unique spoilers, distinctive graphics, performance upgrades, and styling cues that made them stand out from ordinary Javelins. Today, the Mark Donohue Javelins are among the most desirable AMC models ever produced because they represent the direct connection between the street car and its racing counterpart. The biggest breakthrough came when AMC entered the Sports Car Club of America's Trans Am Championship. During the late 1960s and early 1970s, Trans Am racing was one of the most competitive forms of motorsport in North America. Manufacturers treated it as a battleground for bragging rights, fielding heavily modified versions of their production pony cars. Every weekend, Mustangs, Camaros, Barracudas, Challengers, Cougars, and Javelins battled each other in front of enthusiastic crowds. Winning a Trans Am championship could dramatically improve a car's reputation and boost showroom sales. To maximize its chances, AMC hired Roger Penske and Mark Donohue, one of the most successful driver-team combinations in American motorsports. Roger Penske was rapidly building a reputation for meticulous preparation and flawless execution, while Donohue was famous for his intelligence, precision, and relentless pursuit of speed. Together, they transformed the Javelin into a championship-caliber race car. The results didn't come immediately. Competing against well-funded factory teams from Ford and Chevrolet was an enormous challenge for AMC, whose racing budget was significantly smaller. Every improvement had to be carefully planned, and every race became an opportunity to gather valuable data. Donohue worked closely with engineers, constantly refining suspension geometry, aerodynamics, tire setups, and engine performance. Unlike many drivers who simply raced the car they were given, Donohue actively helped develop it into a more capable machine. Their persistence paid off in spectacular fashion. In 1971, the AMC Javelin captured the Trans Am Championship, defeating much larger manufacturers that had dominated the series for years. It wasn't a lucky victory, it was the result of superior engineering, disciplined teamwork, and exceptional driving. The championship immediately elevated AMC's reputation. Suddenly, the smallest American automaker could claim it had built the best road racing pony car in the country. Even more impressively, AMC successfully defended its title in 1972, winning the Trans Am Championship for a second consecutive year. Back-to-back championships proved that the first victory hadn't been a fluke. The Javelin had become a genuine racing legend. For a brief moment, AMC stood on equal footing with Detroit's biggest manufacturers in one of America's premier racing series. Those championships remain among the greatest achievements in the company's history. The racing success had a noticeable impact on public perception. Buyers walking into AMC dealerships no longer saw the company as merely an underdog. Magazine covers proudly featured championship-winning Javelins, advertisements celebrated the Trans Am victories, and the company's performance credentials suddenly seemed completely legitimate. The slogan, "Win on Sunday, sell on Monday," appeared to be working for AMC just as it had for Ford and Chevrolet. To capitalize on its racing image, AMC introduced increasingly aggressive street versions of the Javelin. The AMX package, which had previously existed as a separate two-seat model, became a high-performance trim level for the Javelin itself. These cars featured upgraded suspensions, sporty interiors, distinctive striping, hood scoops, and powerful V8 engines that gave buyers a taste of the racing experience. Performance packages became increasingly popular among enthusiasts who wanted something different from the more common Mustangs and Camaros. Perhaps the most famous of these was the Javelin AMX, equipped with the massive 401 cubic inch V8, producing well over 300 horsepower in gross ratings. The engine delivered tremendous low-end torque and impressive straight-line acceleration. Although official horsepower figures began declining in the early 1970s due to changes in measurement standards and tightening emissions regulations, the 401 remained one of the strongest engines in the muscle car market. Drivers praised its effortless power, deep exhaust note, and ability to overwhelm the rear tires with ease. Yet while AMC was celebrating its greatest racing victories, storm clouds were beginning to gather over the entire American muscle car industry. Insurance companies started charging dramatically higher premiums for high-performance vehicles, making them more expensive for younger buyers to own. Federal emissions regulations became increasingly strict, forcing manufacturers to lower compression ratios and reduce engine output. Safety requirements added weight and complexity to new vehicles, while concerns about fuel economy slowly began influencing consumer behavior. The golden age of muscle cars was approaching its end, even if few enthusiasts fully realized it at the time. AMC had built a championship-winning performance car that finally earned the respect it had chased for years. The Javelin had proven itself on America's toughest road courses, defeated legendary rivals, and established itself as one of the defining pony cars of the early 1970s. From the outside, the future appeared brighter than ever. But beneath the surface, powerful economic and regulatory forces were beginning to reshape the entire automotive industry. Those changes would ultimately threaten not just the Javelin, but the survival of American Motors Corporation itself. The early 1970s should have been the beginning of the AMC Javelin's brightest chapter. It had just won back-to-back Trans Am championships, the AMX performance models were attracting enthusiasts, and the car had finally earned the respect that AMC had spent years chasing. Yet, almost as quickly as the Javelin reached its peak, the environment around it began to change. It wasn't the car that suddenly became bad. Instead, the entire American automotive industry was entering one of the most turbulent periods in its history, and performance cars like the Javelin would become some of the biggest casualties. One of the first warning signs came from insurance companies. During the late 1960s, young buyers could still afford to insure high-performance V8-powered cars. But as muscle cars became faster and accident rates involving younger drivers increased, insurance providers dramatically raised premiums for vehicles equipped with large engines. A 20-year-old who could previously afford a powerful Javelin suddenly found insurance costs nearly as expensive as the monthly car payment itself. Many buyers who dreamed of owning a 360 or 401-powered Javelin instead settled for smaller, less exciting cars simply because they were cheaper to insure. At nearly the same time, the federal government introduced increasingly strict emissions regulations. The Clean Air Act and new Environmental Protection Agency standards forced automakers to reduce exhaust emissions significantly. To comply, manufacturers lowered engine compression ratios, retuned carburetors, installed emissions control equipment, and adjusted ignition timing. These changes dramatically affected performance. Engines that had once produced thrilling acceleration now delivered noticeably less power. The Javelin's mighty V8s were still enjoyable to drive, but they no longer had the explosive character that had made muscle cars famous just a few years earlier. Adding to the confusion was a change in how horsepower was measured. Throughout the 1960s, manufacturers advertised gross horsepower, which measured engines under ideal laboratory conditions without accessories like air cleaners, exhaust systems, or alternators. Beginning in the early 1970s, the industry switched to net horsepower, which reflected engines as they were actually installed in production vehicles. Overnight, horsepower figures appeared to collapse, even though some of the difference was simply due to the new testing method. To many buyers, however, it looked as though every muscle car, including the Javelin, had suddenly become much weaker. Then came the event that completely changed the American car market, the 1973 oil crisis. Triggered by an oil embargo, gasoline prices rose sharply, and long lines formed at service stations across the United States. For the first time in decades, many Americans seriously questioned whether owning a thirsty V8-powered muscle car made financial sense. Fuel economy suddenly became a priority instead of an afterthought. Cars that had once been symbols of freedom and excitement were now criticized for their poor mileage. The Javelin, designed during an era of inexpensive fuel, found itself competing in a market that had fundamentally shifted toward efficiency. Sales reflected this dramatic change in consumer priorities. Demand for performance coupes declined across the industry. Ford Mustang sales slowed, Chevrolet Camaro sales softened, and other pony cars faced similar challenges. The Javelin suffered even more because AMC lacked the financial resources of its larger competitors. Ford, General Motors, and Chrysler could absorb declining sales by relying on their enormous truck, luxury, and family car divisions. AMC had no such safety net. Every slow-selling model placed additional strain on the company's already limited budget. Despite these challenges, AMC refused to abandon the Javelin without a fight. Engineers continued making improvements, refining suspensions, updating interiors, and adding cosmetic enhancements to keep the car attractive. The AMX trim remained the flagship model, featuring bold striping, hood scoops, sporty wheels, and aggressive styling that reminded buyers of the Javelin's racing heritage. Special paint combinations and appearance packages helped distinguish later models, and AMC even experimented with unique colors that gave the car a personality unlike anything else on the road. The 401 cubic inch V8 remained available in high-performance versions, making the Javelin one of the last true muscle cars still offering a big displacement engine. Even with reduced compression ratios and emissions equipment, the engine produced abundant torque that made highway passing effortless and burnouts remarkably easy. Enthusiasts appreciated that AMC continued offering genuine V8 performance when many competitors were already shifting their focus towards smaller engines. Inside the company, however, financial pressures were becoming impossible to ignore. AMC simply didn't have the research and development budget needed to redesign the Javelin for an entirely new generation, while simultaneously meeting increasingly expensive federal safety and emissions requirements. Developing a new platform required hundreds of millions of dollars, an enormous investment that the company could scarcely afford. Every dollar spent on the Javelin was a dollar that couldn't be invested in more practical vehicles with broader market appeal. Management also recognized that consumer tastes were changing. Buyers increasingly wanted compact cars that delivered better fuel economy, lower insurance costs, and greater practicality. Imports from Japan were steadily gaining popularity, offering reliable transportation at affordable prices. Cars from Toyota, Datsun, and Honda attracted customers who might previously have purchased an American compact or intermediate model. AMC needed products capable of competing in this new marketplace rather than relying solely on the shrinking muscle car segment. Ironically, AMC's future salvation would come from a completely different type of vehicle. Around the same time the Javelin was losing momentum, the company was investing in practical four-wheel drive models like the Jeep CJ and developing innovative passenger cars such as the Hornet, Gremlin, and later the Eagle. These vehicles addressed changing consumer demands far more effectively than a traditional pony car. Jeep, in particular, was becoming increasingly valuable to AMC, generating the profits the company desperately needed to survive. As the 1974 model year approached, the writing was on the wall. Sales had fallen well below their peak, and continuing production no longer made financial sense. The muscle car era that had exploded only a decade earlier was rapidly disappearing. Across Detroit, manufacturers were discontinuing performance models, reducing engine sizes, and redesigning cars with fuel economy rather than horsepower as the primary goal. The Javelin, despite its racing success and loyal fan base, simply arrived at the wrong moment in automotive history. Production officially ended after the 1974 model year. There was no dramatic farewell edition or grand celebration marking the occasion. AMC quietly discontinued the Javelin as it shifted its limited resources toward vehicles that offered a better chance of keeping the company alive. After 7 model years, the car that had transformed AMC's image, won national championships, and challenged Detroit's biggest manufacturers disappeared from showrooms. For many enthusiasts, the end felt abrupt and disappointing. The Javelin had never failed because it lacked performance, styling, or character. Instead, it became a victim of changing economics, government regulations, rising fuel prices, and a company that simply couldn't afford to keep fighting on every front. Yet while production had ended, the Javelin's story was far from over. In the decades that followed, collectors would begin to rediscover what AMC had achieved, and the once overlooked pony car would slowly earn the recognition it had always deserved. When production of the AMC Javelin ended after the 1974 model year, many people assumed the car would simply fade into history. American Motors Corporation was already fighting for survival, and without a replacement model waiting in the wings, the Javelin quietly disappeared from dealer showrooms. Unlike the Ford Mustang or Chevrolet Camaro, which would continue evolving for decades, the Javelin's story seemed to be over. Enthusiasts moved on to newer performance cars, and for years the AMC name itself became associated more with quirky economy cars than with championship-winning muscle machines. It appeared that one of America's most unique pony cars had been forgotten. AMC itself continued operating, but the company's financial struggles only became more severe. During the late 1970s, it focused on practical vehicles like the Hornet, Pacer, Gremlin, Spirit, and especially Jeep, whose popularity kept the company alive. While these vehicles served different markets, none could replace the excitement and prestige that the Javelin had brought to the brand. AMC no longer had a true halo performance car capable of drawing enthusiasts into dealerships. Instead, survival became the company's primary goal, and every major business decision reflected that reality. In the early 1980s, AMC achieved one of its greatest engineering successes with the Eagle, one of the first mass-produced passenger cars to combine a traditional car body with full-time four-wheel drive. Today, many historians consider the Eagle a pioneer of the modern crossover segment. Yet despite this innovation, AMC still lacked the financial strength to compete with much larger manufacturers. Research and development costs continued rising, competition became increasingly intense, and the company simply couldn't generate enough profits to remain independent. By 1987, AMC's long journey came to an end when Chrysler Corporation acquired the company. The purchase wasn't primarily about AMC's passenger cars. Chrysler wanted Jeep, whose rugged off-road vehicles had become incredibly valuable. The Jeep brand would go on to become one of the most profitable automotive brands in America, while nearly every AMC passenger car, including the Javelin, disappeared permanently. There were no serious discussions about reviving the Javelin name under Chrysler ownership. The market had moved in a different direction, and muscle cars were only beginning a slow comeback that wouldn't truly gain momentum until the late 1990s and early 2000s. For a long time, the Javelin remained one of the most overlooked classic American muscle cars. While collectors aggressively pursued Mustangs, Camaros, Challengers, Chargers, and GTOs, AMC products often sold for significantly lower prices. Some enthusiasts mistakenly viewed AMC as a second-tier manufacturer, assuming its performance cars couldn't match those produced by Detroit's Big Three. This perception caused many Javelins to be neglected, modified beyond recognition, or even scrapped. Because values remained relatively low through the 1980s and 1990s, relatively few owners invested in expensive restorations. Ironically, this neglect would eventually make surviving original examples much rarer. As the collector car market matured, attitudes began to change. Historians and enthusiasts started looking beyond the familiar names and rediscovered just how significant the Javelin had been. People realized that it wasn't merely another pony car, it was the only pony car ever built by American Motors Corporation. They remembered its two consecutive Trans Am championships in 1971 and 1972, achieved against some of the biggest names in American motorsport. Racing success that had once been overshadowed by Ford and Chevrolet was finally receiving the recognition it deserved. Collectors also began appreciating Dick Teague's bold styling. What some critics considered unconventional in 1970 now looked refreshingly different in a world filled with restored Mustangs and Camaros. The exaggerated front fenders, distinctive roofline, and aggressive proportions gave the Javelin a personality unlike any other muscle car. At classic car shows, it often attracted crowds simply because many people had never seen one in person. Owners frequently found themselves answering questions from curious spectators who recognized the name but had little knowledge of its history. The rarest versions became especially desirable. Mark Donahue editions, built to celebrate AMC's Trans Am racing program, grew dramatically in value due to their limited production and direct connection to one of America's greatest racing drivers. Javelins equipped with the 401 cubic inch V8 became highly sought after because they represented the ultimate expression of AMC performance. Factory 4-speed manual cars, original Go package models, and well-documented AMX versions also attracted serious collectors willing to pay substantial premiums for authentic examples. The restoration community also embraced the Javelin. Specialty suppliers began reproducing trim pieces, body panels, decals, interior components, and mechanical parts that had once been nearly impossible to find. Dedicated AMC clubs across North America helped owners locate rare components, exchange technical knowledge, and preserve the company's automotive legacy. What had once been considered an orphan brand gradually developed one of the most passionate enthusiast communities in the collector car world. The Javelin's racing history has become an even more important part of its legacy. Vintage Trans Am events frequently feature restored race cars that remind modern audiences just how competitive the AMC program once was. Seeing a brightly colored Javelin battle Mustangs and Camaros on historic race circuits reinforces an important fact that is sometimes forgotten. AMC didn't merely participate in the muscle car era, it won at the highest levels of competition. Those back-to-back championships remain one of the greatest achievements by any independent American automaker. Today, the Javelin occupies a unique place in automotive history. It represents the determination of a small company that refused to accept defeat simply because it lacked the resources of its competitors. AMC knew it couldn't outspend Ford or General Motors, so it relied on clever engineering, bold styling, innovative marketing, and relentless determination. For a brief but unforgettable period, that strategy worked remarkably well. The Javelin earned respect on the street, dominated on the racetrack, and proved that great muscle cars didn't have to come from the industry's largest manufacturers. Its story also serves as a reminder that success alone isn't always enough to guarantee survival. The Javelin was a capable, attractive, and genuinely exciting performance car. It didn't disappear because enthusiasts stopped loving it. It disappeared because rising insurance costs, tightening emissions regulations, the 1973 oil crisis, shifting consumer preferences, and AMC's limited financial resources created challenges that even an outstanding car couldn't overcome. In many ways, the Javelin became a victim of circumstances far beyond its control. So, what happened to the AMC Javelin? It wasn't defeated by the Mustang or Camaro. It wasn't discontinued because it lacked performance or style. Instead, it became one of the final casualties of the original muscle car era, disappearing just as the automotive world entered a completely different chapter. Yet decades later, the Javelin has achieved something few forgotten cars ever do. It has earned a second life as a respected collector's classic, admired not only for its striking design and powerful V8 engines, but also for representing the courage of a small automaker that dared to challenge Detroit's biggest giants, and, for a remarkable moment in history, actually beat them.